Okay, so confession here, I did not expect to make this tier list, but because of how DZBT05 is essentially the end of season booster, a lot of things changed quite drastically in fact. So I decided to make it as kind of like a follow-up to my DZBT04 tier list that just came out recently, and I decided to focus on decks that did get additional support.
What the hell?
So if there is a double R support in the booster or they just got the PR recently, they are under this list. For those who came here for the first time, welcome. If you notice that I did not do much to other entry, check my previous tier list for it because I did adjust quite a lot of them. But for this video, I'm gonna be focusing on the decks that did get the support, and the usual rule still maintains, you know, 13 entry in the top 2 tiers, and of course this is 100% based on my experience. And as usual, leave your thoughts in the comment down below. And without further ado, let's get to what I would call the support that received no change from the booster, since that's all the information I have right now. So starting off with Dragon Empire, we have two particular decks that I feel will have no change, and that is Gandiva and Gryandra. Okay, so for Gandiva case, I feel it ages like fine wine, the new support, especially considering we have confirmed that we are getting Gandiva Mask by the time I recorded this part of the video, but we do not know what the card does yet. So all I can say is it finally have a good support that help you to search the grade that the deck used the most, and that is grade 3, and that is more or less pretty much it. Let's just hope the brand new Gandiva Mask will actually make a difference despite the restriction of Sturgana at 1. And then we have Gryandra. This one is forgettable support. Like, you already have such a strong regard to whack like Lava Flow Dragon or even the Success, but what I would like to point out is a possible connection to side build. You see, in the anime, has been confirmed side build is Union Dragon. So are we getting a dark synchronized version of Gryandra, or to an extension the Go Mad version similar to side build? We don't know, but I just want to lay my theory down here first. We might get a crazy update with Gryandra, but at the current stage, completely no change. The support is 100% useless, but not completely shut down the deck. Moving from Dragon Empire to Dark States, we have, to be honest, all of the supports are essentially completely no change. Yes, Unica did get a new Chimera that actually make use of the restand effect of Baiko, but you do have to sacrifice quite a bit of your crit to get a lot of power. But the problem with Unica, and for the longest time I did not notice it until very recently when I tested it, is the fact that sacrificing trigger has never been a good thing. And I think Unica is a living proof of that, despite the deck is able to push it really well. For Unica, if you cannot aggro early game, I feel most of the time your late game doesn't perform as well as I think it would. So that's why no change. Gridon is in a similar situation as well. The new support is essentially a Destined Researcher, which does help you to prep your board in a much easier way, as some of the strongest cards in the Gridon, regardless of which variant you run, are Destined Devil. But I feel this is 100% an Overlord Syndrome situation, where if you pull poor drive checks, your deck just loses. And with Gridon being a YOLO playstyle Overlord deck, it's a bit hard to pull the craziness and make it balanced. They try to do with Mask, it works, but I feel it's far from perfect. And that's why no change as well. And then last but not least, Daffodils. Well, I already kind of talked about it in the previous tier list with the fact that the deck did get a counter charge, which does allow you to more or less use undraw skill every single turn, which is really good. And similar to how Ellie is a great partner to Olin, Bartolomea is a great partner to Tranquinia because of how they work off each other. The only problem I would have to say with the door, and the reason why I decided not to change its ranking, it kind of boiled down to two reasons. One, as I already said before, that shield number start to get a little bit harder to guard in the more recent meta with the higher power, and also the meta kind of counter it because less attack. On top of that, going into double loss intentionally is still a thing. I would say you can play it in WGP, but be very careful. It is very easy to be exploited. Okay, and then we have Brantgate, and I can safely say generally every single support from Brantgate in this booster are kind of mid, except for one. Start off with the worst among the support, Elite Glamour. The support is is, I'll be honest, great. Like the fact that you have a persistent beast stick that retain its increased crit on top of a card that allow you to play into Elite Glamour skill better is really helpful. The main problem with Elite Glamour is he himself. Getting a 5 different set order to trigger his full effect consistently is really impossible to pull off, and to make things worse, even if you pull half of his skill, you still have to send back the set order, which is stupid! And the fact that you still have to write into Elite Glamour every turn to get all this thing out, it's just dumb. Like, I'll say this now, Elite Glamour is a poorly designed boss. It is 100% designed for high rolling and it does the job very poorly. And that's why no change from D tier. And then we have another disappointment, Gundam Rotovisor. It also did get a few significant support in the form of Tra 1 Rotovisor, which does allow you to have a little bit wider range when you search via the grade 2 right line skill. And in all fairness, it does make using the Vanguard skill a lot better while making it a bigger number. The problem is the fact that you still have Able Syndrome and the fact that most of the attacks and recovery heavily rely on his skills. And I think I have made enough video to make it clear that I don't like on his skill. It is way too reliant and too dynamic to predict, and because of that, no change to Rotovisor. And the same goes for the last two I will be talking about in this part, and that is Orifice and both have a similar group of support in a sense that
they utilize the respective deck's mechanics
and allow it to be returned to the hand, allowing you to have a slightly better shield value, allow you to live just a little bit longer, while still allow yourself to have an aggression on it. With Orifice, literally just get a 15k shield grade 2, while Hero has essentially Bosalaw's partner, which is better than you think it is. And the best way to put these 2 and 3 together when it comes to the new support is stabilization, and I think that's all it does, and that's why no change. And moving into Keter Sanctuary, we have only 2 decks despite getting quite a number of support that is in what I would call no change territory. And first one is Youth, which still considered to be a very strong deck despite all this time. And in all fairness, the new support is great, allowing you to have more discard target while recycling itself is really good, while the unit itself also helped to recycle the reroll form that accidentally went to damage to put into soul, allowing you to set up your full blast a little bit easier. But unfortunately, I personally feel the deck needs a little bit more early game draws unless you run draws in your deck, and it would be nice if they gave a different form of reroll form that allowed the deck to play a little bit more differently without going into, you know, Tatoba. So it's a shame, like genuinely a shame, because the reroll form mechanic was really fun until they go full blast with it. It's still kind of funny that like after all this time I still think full blast is such a shit card, but now it is shit for a different reason. And then we have Alden.
You're failing on the highest level.
The deck that has been kind of like a Bushiroad Keter punching bag for some time, but you know what, for once they make quite a decent support for the deck, where the support allow you to guard in the earlier part of the game, and by that I mean turn 3, a little bit better while buffing up your weaker attacks, which was a problem that I have with the Alden back in DCBT04. But I do feel the deck require a little bit more of cooking to make it work properly. Like the support that they have been released for Alden was working well, but I do think it just needs a few more RRR quality support to really solidify Alden as a Keter go-to rush deck until Platina release, that is. Like, you have my condolences SL players. And then we have Stoicheia with only one deck that I consider to have zero change, Veleno. Veleno generally did get a great support as they get another grade 1 searcher, allowing you to not only search for Blitz Order but also for another Veleno that helped the situation a little bit better, and the card itself allow you to hit a better number as well. The problem with Veleno, I feel, is that it became way too counterblast heavy already. You have the new Veleno that used counterblast, the original searcher that used counterblast, and this guy, I forgot the name, who do use counterblast as well. The point is there are just way too many counterblasts in the deck. There's not enough countercharge to go around, and the one from the Veleno herself is not enough. I know you can run Trident, but I feel similar to the issue that I talk about Badia in my top 10 DCBT05 cards. You are forced to run a generic card and it affects the searchability of your searcher. So if you can get a Veleno Charger, even if it's a little bit harder to play or can only use it once per turn, it is good enough. Bring back the hard once per turn Bushiroad. Trust me, it will work and people will not shit on you. And then we have the Lyrical, with only one deck that I consider to have no change at all, and that's Lysiophile, and purely for one reason. I overrated it in the previous tier list. Now, I would consider high A to be a good spot for Lysiophile because Nilenia is an incredible follow-up to initial support of Lysia, as not only it allows you to loop Belly Shell, it also allows you to use a huge amount of soul that you already has without heavily relying on your generics. And on top of that, looping Belly Shell also means consistent counter charge and draw, which is something that the deck needs to make sure that Abelina works every single turn. The only drawback I would say with Lysiophile at the moment is a bit of filter. The deck still rely on the generic to get the filter out properly, so unfortunately you have to take out your wallet and burn it to the ground because some of those support, despite the price dropping, is still quite expensive. So thank God for Koro booster, I finally will have a playset of Stoicheia, and that is a godsend, at least for me. And that is pretty much for the no change ranking from the booster. Now let's move on to those I consider to have no change from the PR side. And among the 6 different decks that did get a PR support, I would say 3 kind of stagnate, and that is Benny, yes, the visible one, Emma from Visible, and Virgila. So let's talk about Benny first because it's the easiest to talk about. Among the 3 I'm gonna be talking about, as the new support is mid as fuck.
That escalated quickly.
Like, in all fairness, I feel the only purpose of her new support is to Soul Blast more card. And because of the fact that you are forced to Soul Blast a specific card, this is supposed to help you to cycle Roro more often, which is a good thing. Like, she is still a 20k beater, but the problem is something that I feel is not needed solving because it has already been solved.
You're failing in the highest level.
Gungun Ram are generally in most of the Benny build anyways, so you already have a card that helps you to Soul Blast just enough to more or less just send out most of the Roroa for Kurumi to essentially cycle already. So having another card that helps you to do it is a little bit unnecessary, especially the plus 10k require you to go second with it. I'll be honest, if that PR is in a main booster, it will be just a rare, like seriously. And it's a little bit annoying because the PR for the other 2 decks that I consider to have no change, Emma and Virgila, is actually good. Like for Emma, the PR actually fixed one of the issues that she does have to an extent, and that is the fact that every time she restands, she loses a drive. So the brand new PR help to recover it. Meanwhile, it is also a 15k booster, just like any other deck with the Divine skill. The point is, the new PR allow her to overload a little bit better, which is a really good thing. And the best part is, it is done in the most non-intrusive way. The only problem I would say with Emma is that you kind of rely on Order Engine a lot more because you have to super call those cards out, because unfortunately all the PRs for Visible are not visible, so you can't really play those cards in a pure Visible deck, which is a little bit retarded. But you know what, they're giving support for a collab deck, which is really rare, so I'm gonna close my eye on it. And speaking of Dragon Empire, we do have one more deck to talk about, and of course that is Virgila. Virgila did get a brand new grade 2, which allow you to essentially buff the server, the most important regard of the deck, not only in terms of power and value it can give, but also a protection skill, which, you know what, it is pretty good. The only drawback I have to say with it is just that it has to be in your drop, and it is one-time thing only. It is okay. It allows Virgila to have a better finish with a higher number, but I don't see this PR fix any other issue that Virgila does have. In fact, making this card by itself to use the skill actually sabotage the deck because of the impact card of Virgila allow you to gain additional 3k for every normal unit in your drop or regards on your field. So it's a really weird support, at least in my opinion. It works, it's just sacrificing some other aspect that I'm not sure worth sacrificing or not, and that's why no change. And it is no big secret that Runa was the worst among the 3 visible, and in all honesty, she kind of is. The main reason behind her problem is her requirement to play 2 different orders from your hand. This is a little bit different from Alchematic, and as you can see here, -2 just to get your full power online is insane. Fortunately enough, the PR fixed her problem by essentially be a free 3 core unit. On top of the fact that you can call multiple of her within the same turn, allowing you to boost the Vanguard power by one of her skill and then use her as a call over target with Runa skill. So in all fairness, Runa aggro has improved a lot since then. However, she still need to commit, and by that I mean a lot of commitment. And because of that, I'm willing to lift her up into like C tier. Runa just get better, but I feel the best way to fix her is to have a unique order that either count as a twice activation, preventing you from overly committing your hand, or at least being able to activate from somewhere else. That is how I feel. But I know you guys are not here for the booster point stuff. Let's talk about the main meat from the PR pack, Shiranui and Luard. And I would say both of them did get a similar benefit in a sense that the new order does bring a solution to their problem, and that is the removal of counter blast cost. Because with the order second skill, you can essentially waive the counter blast cost for Luard superior core skill, and by that I mean both version, and of course Shiranui Magun Tembu skill. The fact that you have a spare counter blast to use Genkai for Shiranui, or a counter blast to search for a PG from units like Dera, makes a lot of difference for this deck. Of course, there are some other benefit, of course, in a sense that Shiranui now has a revive,
Genuinely disgusting.
which does matter, especially with the recent ban list. You want to recoup Furai or Sekie as much as possible. But the issue with this also is that you do have to use a certain tech to get Furai into your drop consistently, or you just pray that your overwhelmingly strong draw engine that Dragon Empire has to draw enough cards to go into Furai, especially considering you no longer can really use EV Cycler that efficiently already, because you do want to leave some energy for this order. Meanwhile, for Luard, the bot buff is nice, but the main issue behind this is if it is just call from deck plus 5k, it would have been good, but the fact that you have to achieve ratio 5 before you can do anything means that you have to commit a little bit harder to be able to use it as early as turn
4.
And unlike Shiranui, where some of the energy use cards are far and few in between, for Luard there is a few more choice you can play. So if you still want to play undercover engine in your deck, you do have to plan your energy use in advance, because you are most likely to try to use energy as much as possible with Gris, which is an insane early game card by the way. And I would say both of the decks does have one disadvantage as well, because you're running into more bricks. Yes, the order itself is a brick, and unfortunately a lot of the deck in this booster does have a really strong aggro on turn 4, and unfortunately this deck among the strike decks are not the best at Garrett 2 games. So unfortunately for both of them, I'm dropping both of the entry down just a little bit, where Shiranui gets just slightly down the A+ tier, and Luard completely off the list into high A tier. Both these decks still a very strong entry, but I would say it has finally fallen off. And before we go into the entry that did get some change in some way, I have to talk about one more card that I forget to cover earlier on, and that is Seraph. Prison did get one more card in the form of Capture Sharino.
Cringe.
Capture Sharino is, I would say, fall in the same realm as Office and Hero in terms of support. For Capture Sharino case is a stabilization of a card that can do more than one job, and in this case is the ability to have more cards to Prism a little bit more consistently, while also is able to hard spin your opponent card. Not the best way to control, but at least it is something, especially if you are going up against deck that is not capable of filter properly, or at least have a limited filter power. So yeah, it is good enough, but doesn't disturb a rank up. Okay, finally it is time to talk about the rank up. And just like earlier, we're gonna start off with Dragon Empire with El Quiribra. So El Quiribra, as I mentioned in my top 10 video, we did get Badia, which is a really good card, as now the deck has a way to search for overcharge unit, particularly Shahu, and the order in itself. So this helps by a lot, and in all fairness, the other support does help in some way. But the issue with all this new support also is that it does have an equivalent exchange that is a little bit awkward as well. Like for Badia case, you have to -1 from your hand. The 15k shield unit needs 3 overcharge unit to be on the field, and against the meta that there is a deck that literally can nuke the board is a little bit painful. And I still feel the fact that you can only full overcharge your board during the one skill only does hurt the deck a lot, even if the number is really huge. Equilibra has to go first. If it cannot go first, it just did. So because of that, I'm shifting Equilibra down just a little bit into the lower end of high A tier. And while we are at it, we also have to talk about the meme, the legend, the invincible Eugene. We all know Eugene has always been kind of a shit deck for a really long time, and Inferno Duststorm fixed a lot of issue that the original has, and in general just make playing Eugene feel so much better. Everything gelled together quite well enough to not consider Eugene a joke. Like, the deck actually can rush to 7 attack when all the support are together, and because of the fact that the deck can superior call quite consistently every turn, and you can return card from drop back to top of your deck, guaranteeing the pieces that you need to combo, it does make Eugene has some kind of win con, which is really important for the deck that doesn't have one for a long time. The problem though is exactly the same reason I mentioned earlier. You do need the pieces, especially one defensive does a lot to the end board of Eugene, on top of the fact that despite being able to combo really well, it doesn't have a proper finisher unit yet. Is Eugene gonna get the insane finisher that the deck needs? No one knows. But at the moment, I would say he is definitely better than Baromagnes and moving himself back into B tier. And then we move into Dark States. And as someone who has been playing Dark States more or less forever, one clear pattern I have seen with Bushiroad handling Dark State is that first wave of a brand new Dark States deck tend to not shine properly because they love to fuck with us.
Am I a joke to you?
Liar Odium is not one of those decks. Maybe it's because of Gear Chronicle Magic, who knows. But regardless, the deck has a great and consistent draw engine that play well into Order engine, allowing you to unlock a lot of filter thanks to Orients and everything. And on top of that, the deck also play well into Filia, which essentially allow you to have a better draw power as well. On top of the fact that it has extra turn for the Divine skill, which does bring different kind of pressure in a sense that whatever defensive you build up in the previous turn is all gone now, as much as you also lose your offense that earn through triggers or Pesanarai as well. But the deck is still able to build a very consistent board and high numbers. However, there is a few problems that Odiums greatly suffer, and it is very clear if you play the deck before, and that is there is generally a cap to the number that it boosted, and at the same time, if you cannot play Distorted Pain, you are screwed. But as a first brand new deck, it is definitely really strong, and that is why I'm putting Odium into A+ tier. Yes, a brand newbie into A+ tier, and this is not gonna be the only time. Compared to the 6th Destined one, she definitely has the best first impression, at least for me.
Shut up, simp.
Which is something I can't really say when it comes to Impaudio.
That escalated quickly.
Like, Router is a okay filter, but the problem with that card is that you already have another card that fulfills the job that it needed to be done, and it does a whole lot better than Router does. To put it simply, the problem was not solved, and that means that Impaudio stagnate. Stagnation is, I feel, is not exactly something that a brand new deck want to see, as they are still developing, and because of that, I'm shifting Impaudio in to the bottom of A+ tier. I still think he has potential, but I feel his reliance on drive check is what kills him the hardest right now. And then we have something quite crazy actually, because we did get a collab in the form of Love and Barry, and these two decks are just insane. It has a craze that in my opinion is one of the most stupid craze that I have ever seen, as it has very strong filter, quite free revive considering what some of the witches does, and even if you are not able to filter properly, you have another card that more or less fix the issue if needed to, like literally just -2 from the deck. And it's also the reason behind Racionale as a grade 3 boss unit in the right deck. You know, funny move, but it's a loophole that I feel deserves its own video to talk about. Regardless, I would say the best part about these two decks is the fact that it can get aggro really quickly, especially with Love, who has essentially a triple Hyperdrive that can go into 5 attacks. That also buff those Stray card from turn 4 onwards, which is, in all honesty, pretty insane. Meanwhile, Barry, even though not as strong as Love, is still a pretty solid deck to go with, as this is one of the few deck instances where you can kind of preventing them from striding for at least one turn, allowing Barry to at least have a bit more time to fully set up the board properly before the strider can start doing anything. So because of the fact that Love is just insanely strong for a 5 attack deck that can rush very early on, and Barry is a deck that does need a bit of technical knowledge to play properly, but does have some good plus and minus,
So,
I'm gonna put Love into A+ tier as one of the strongest deck in the format right now actually. And Barry, I'm gonna put her into high B. That is how big of a gap in terms of power level I feel, because compared to Love, Barry still needs a bit more commitment in filter for her to work properly. Meanwhile, Love is as good as she is already. And then we have Solaron from mid B to high B. Okay, I'll say this now. A lot of people might say I am copying for Solaron, but with the confirmation of the Solaron mask, Right 10, which is a new support for Solaron, is a huge step in the right direction for Solaron, because it is a very big beast deck that go into Soul afterward. And while in Soul, he also help you to set up top of your deck by any card that was in the drop at the time, allowing you to essentially control how your board will look like after Solaron trigger the skill. And this doesn't take into account Solaron mask at all. But at the moment, before the Solaron mask, the deck still have some issue. You do need to see lecture as soon as possible so that you can use a lot of CC and occasionally draw to make sure that you can live long enough. And at the same time, if you do not have a right beast deck, the deck aggression is not as explosive as the other deck I'll be mentioning right after this, as it doesn't have a drive check pressure, at least for now. And speaking of the deck that has a better aggro than Solaron right now, we have Lyle Amorta. Yes, I consider Lyle overall support to be a huge plus. Sequence Wizard
is
a good support as it helps you to filter out the deck, helping you to fill the board with some necessity card like Seogaon, the Countercharger Dog, or Gabelius, which is the reason why I'm putting Lyle from C tier into high B, as Gab bring an offensive level that allow Lyle to OTK. That is how good Gab offensive level is. This is kind of boiled down to the fact that the deck has deck manipulation. Lyle does thin the deck down enough, and this is on top of Sequence Wizard. And even if some of the card will return to deck afterwards, it return to the bottom. So until you start searching with Lyle again, it doesn't really affect the trigger ratio that much overall. But just like Solaron, the deck still heavily rely on a very specific card to be there and to perform a proper OTK. Because of that, it can be inconsistent, because the card that you can fetch, even if there are some that can be guaranteed, the others you have to either hard draw or pray that Sequence Wizard search helps you through. And then we move into a grass nation or wet nation, depend on how you want to put it. And I feel like for DCBT05, one particular deck seems to pull a Spirit Bomb maneuver with the rest of the deck that got support in the booster, because all of them either is a very mid support or an okay support. As we start off with the Grand Fear, who unfortunately has to be dropped off the list from somewhere in B to high C tier. The reason behind this is kind of boiled down to the fact that despite he's getting Laura, which is a very strong beater and can technically be used if you're going first, if you're running the original Grand Fear right line, it is another CB unit that unfortunately clogging up a deck that already have a clog up CB issue, on top of the fact that the deck do not really have a counter charge on its own as well, since the deck cannot use Trident. Yes, the deck has some draw, and with the right cards you can hit a ridiculously high number with this deck, but if you can't cycle fast enough, then it is useless.
Disappointed!
And that's why I'm dropping him into high C tier. And then we have Flagberg, and there's nothing much to say about a Flagberg because the new support is a nice modernization for the deck, as it is a 23k attacker regardless of whether you're going first or second, so it is enough to shift up the rank. However, I would say Flagberg without using the order does lack a proper way to build the board for the attack. Do note that by the time I record this video, I decided not to take into account of the Skyride, the second PR, so things might change for Flagberg and to an extension Maelstrom as well, since Maelstrom is getting a new support. But since only Flagberg get a new support, I'm gonna be just talking about him, and I'm considering him as a high B unit, and that is where my slightly higher rank come from. And yeah, that is pretty much for the Stoicheia. And we have come to the second last stop before the main event, Lyrical Monasterio. And I'll say this now, a lot of deck in this nation has gotten quite a spicy support, as I feel every single one of them actually improve all the deck that gets supported in some way or another. Don't believe me? Just look at Chris Rain, because Tor Mana is an amazing follow-up to Rochelle, which does kind of make sense now why Rochelle was slightly mid at first, because Tor Mana in the easiest way possible is essentially upstream dragon but balanced. You can check one of my previous video for more details, but the easiest TLDR I can put is Tor Mana reduce the need of using Annet and also give you easy access to units like Rom, Rochelle, Yuika, the cat, or even Rusius. Essentially any grade 1 that you can think of, Tor Mana can help you search for it, except for PG that is. And on top of that, Tor Mana also helped the deck during the D1 skill a whole lot better, as not only she is essentially Anet's best partner, however the deck is still lacking in pressure just a little bit, thanks to the fact that you do want to counterblast one with Chris Rain every single turn. So a lot of forward thinking is needed, but fortunately enough, the deck is capable enough to keep up with your forward side to that extent. And I'm not gonna lie, I really want to put Chris Rain into A+ tier, but even with all that, I can only put Chris Rain into high A. I can't put her any higher than that because she still have some clunkiness in it, and on top of that, in the current meta, she kind of struggle because you have someone who can do bot wipe right now. So unfortunately for Chris Rain, she definitely constantly ever changing, but the ever changing needs to have a bigger wave. And the same goes for Flamgy as well, as I kind of talked about it in the previous tier list video as well. We received a brand new Flamgy Regard and a brand new double R, which more or less help the deck much better, as it allow you to remodulate off Flamgy Regard to 13k, allowing you to have a better rush early game, and also the double R help you to recoup the retire cost of the Flamgy unit, which allow you to making sure that you can fulfill the condition of Roya very consistently. And to top it off, Flamgy as a deck is extremely self-contained, as you more or less want to run everything that she was given, as they are the best support that she could have asked for. So you don't have to heavily rely on expensive cards like any generic you can think of, making this one of the cheapest Lyrical deck you ever want to build. But she does have a problem, and that is the fact that she does fizzle off in the late game very quickly if you do not have a persona. And even with persona, I feel her power level is more or less very constant throughout without drive check or trigger. So she is a little bit similar to Shoujology in that regard, where you just hope that you can go first and rush them till no tomorrow. And to make things worse, this deck, just like Shoujology, also need quite a bit of counterblast and to an extension energy as well, because the new Flamgy Regard need 2 energy, the new Searcher from previous booster also need energy to search it out. So with all that considered, I gonna put Flamgy into mid A tier. I do think it is definitely better than my initial ranking of her, which was low A in my previous tier list, but the new support wasn't the most insane that make her meta. But she's definitely a sleeper pick in Lyrical Cup for sure. And then we have the most fun out of all Lyrical deck I have talked so far today, and that is Petrauga. I'm not gonna lie, I wish I know about her sooner so that I can build her, because holy shit, she is really fun to play, because her high roll is some of the funniest you can pull off, because of the fact that as long as you can trigger her skill and catch into another copy of her, you can use a skill over and over again, which in my opinion is really fun lah. Like when you high roll Petrauga, it just feels so fun and so good at the same time. And the support really help you to make sure that you have enough body on the board to take advantage of that as well. Grade 2 from previous booster help you to search for more cards to the field, or the order if you run any in your deck. Meanwhile, the brand new grade 2 that we received in this booster help you to return the original Petrauga back to deck, making sure that you have something in that deck so that you can use the skill to rewrite it back later on. But it doesn't mean that Petrarca doesn't have her own problem, and that is boiled down to the fact that even though she has two different card cycle, I feel the cycle timing is a little bit awkward, which makes the consistency drop quite a bit. Also the fact that the grade 3 that treated as Petrarca only treated as her name in the deck, so it does have some awkwardness in the deck to an extent.
It never ends.
Just give us a brand new Petrarca, and I think that would fix every aspect of the deck. But until then, she get a new ranking, mid B tier. I do think she is that consistent when it comes to her looping of the skill, but she is still not consistent enough to be able to win consistently. It is still a very high rolly deck, but at least with the current support that Lyrical does have, it is able to pull off to an extent. But unfortunately, thanks to her Highlander nature, she cannot do that consistently. And then it is time to talk about the main three of this booster: the Fated King, the Destined King, and the Malworm. So let's get through each of them and see why each of them deserve to be in S tier. Yes, all three of the entry I'm talking about here will be in S tier, and do not worry, I will re-rank some of these decks after talking about these three boss units. So let's start off with the one at the top of my notes, Vaga. Okay, so Vaga, in my opinion, in terms of how much he has changed, not much has really changed because he is still more or less the same old Vaga we have seen before. But with Rakshasa, you do have a capability to do an easy board wipe, and that does make a lot of decks suffer because of the fact that many decks do want to leave their record alone, especially in the back row. So the fact that Vaga get rid of all of them in one single swoop kind of kill almost every single deck in every single tier that does have a reliance on rear guard. Of course, board wipe is not the only thing that he has. He did get a Storm Slasher, the card that I seriously still feel it will be heavily abused later on if Vaga get even more support. So I'll say this again, Erota, fix it so that it won't get broken again, Bushiroad. Seriously. And then we have the MC deck, Raziel. We already talked to a certain extent about Gup already, so I'm not gonna go into deep detail about Gup, but I would say Vita as update overall, it is definitely an okay update. It is definitely the weakest update among the three, but it is good enough to make a difference because despite the additional resource that you have to put in, calling 3 record makes a lot of difference because that's guaranteed to attack, which makes a lot of difference. And as I already talked about Gup earlier, an insane offensive unit that does make use of the increased trigger ratio of Raziel with divine skill better, meanwhile also help to do more deck manipulation on top of Niveris. Essentially, right ingredient has been put in the pot for Vita, but it does have a problem, and based on what I have seen in my comments, some of you are not very happy about it as well, and that is the fact that now Raziel became a grade 3 galore deck, just like the other deck that we're gonna be talking about later. But fortunately enough for Keter, you do have enough support to go around to make sure that you have Raziel in your hand, regardless of whether it is Vita or the original. So with all of these reasons combined, Raziel get an S tier. And then we have the deck that I feel deserve all the praise because Levidras is also in S tier. I know I already said that all the three in S tier, but I think we need more reason to talk about why Levidras is in the S tier. So first off, obviously, Imperial fixed most of the issue that the deck has. All the slowness that I feel original Levidras have from ever since the launch in DCPT04 now is nowhere to be seen, thanks to the fact that you can just run Imperial in the right line and just don't care about the divine skill, just generate more marker as much as possible. And because of that flexibility of marker placement, you can essentially play Levidras very flexibly, where if you need more draws, you just give it to your opponent. You need more attacker, you just give it to yourself. Simple as that, and you don't need to think of it too much as well. And on top of that, the deck also get two quite incredible support in the form of Charnet and Inquisitor Squirrel. Levidras got all the right support at the right time. And that is pretty much all the ranking from all the new support in this booster. But before we end this video, I have to adjust some of the ranking quickly. So I'm gonna do a quick editing trick, I guess. Okay, so I think As you can clearly see, one additional role has been added for a minus tier. Nothing much to talk about here. I am fully aware some entry might be wrong in the list. I will come back and do it in the next tier list. So yeah, and then we have the 5 entries that I think some of you guys are wondering why it has been ranked down. Nairos and Shojology didn't really change much in terms of what they can do, but I would say there are more decks that is able to handle Shojology early game now. Yes, it is safe to say the ban list works. And then we have decks that can kind of get around or completely hard counter Nairos defense as well. They are still relevant, but they're not as relevant as it used to be. And then we have Dayusha and Michu. I bring them down for more or less similar reason. They just simply overflow and just fall off the list. But for Lianon in particular, it's a little bit different because of the fact that as we move further deeper into DCBT05, we essentially has a replacement for Lianon players. If you want to play Stoicheia deck that have a strong power and rush, you rather go Levidras because there is a certain niche of infinite eye markers and better draws. Meanwhile, if you want to stick to like 6 attack burst, you rather go for Odium, who do have a much better hand and a much lower need for the board commitment. It is definitely a shame for a deck that finally make it to S tier to just suddenly got sharply dropped out of the meta. But some of what I think may be wrong, so do leave down in the comments below. And yes, this is the end of the tier list. I am planning to make another tier list for the rest of the booster as well, so do look forward to that. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, don't forget to clap that sub and become a member for some cool perks. And this is Mac Mechanic signing out.
Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom.